Well, the show is based on a comic in the daily newspaper back when there were comics and newspapers. And it was called You Can with Beekman and Jax. And it was invented and made by Jock Church. And he answered questions from kids about science. And they would write in and he would answer them in these cartoons. So that was the how the idea came about for the TV show, to make a TV show sort of based on that idea of kids writing in and asking the scientist. And I, they had a hard time finding somebody to play the part. So in Hollywood, they couldn't find anybody, which is like hilarious. So they looked outside of the Hollywood actor thing, and I'm a performance artist and a puppeteer. And the director, Jay Dubin, knew me from New York. So they brought me out and I got the job. Uh, I was involved in the early part of the creation of the show. I wasn't credited and I wasn't paid to do it, but I come from a theater world where getting credit and getting paid is just not that important. And I thought it would be more fun to help make up the show and invent things, and it would just be more fun. The show would be better if I could be involved with it. I mean, maybe that's arrogant, but anyway. Well, the hair was something that was invented by Jock Church in the cartoon. The character had sort of a wild, the cliche of the wild scientist. The executive producer, Mark Waxman, said, let's do a green lab coat, which I think was a great idea because white on screen is really ugly. This big expanse of white of a lab coat looks like horrible. So to have a green lab coat was an interesting idea. And then Jay Dubin gave the show the look. He was the director, and he's very creative, he's brilliant, and he's great at science. He knows science. He's really great at humor and comedy. He's an expert in that stuff. But then he also looked at the frame as almost like a painting, like frame to frame. He was really into composing the frame and making it work. And, the cameras never moved. They just were locked off. The performers moved back and forth between the two cameras. And that's what made it kinetic. It's, very unusual. It's not the way things are usually done. And
And
the cameras were super close to us too. They were like, I don't know, 2 feet from us, 3 feet. And they were right next to each other. They were touching each other.
yes,
And they had ultra wide angle lenses. I mean, it's crazy. Who does that? Well, I remember Mark Waxman, the executive producer, he told me, because we were trying to sort of figure out who the character is. He said, oh, the character is when you get like all excited about something and you start waving your hands around and your New York accent gets a little stronger. He said, that's the guy. And that was another very good note. It was a very helpful note. Um, and the shoulder rolling and all that stuff. And Jay would say to me before a take, he would say, give me that bada bing guy. Or he'd say, roll the shoulders. He's trying to rile me up to get me. The problem is the character's so close to me that I still don't really know how to play him. Like sometimes I get interviewed in character, and it's like, I'm not going to play some character in the interview. I'm just going to be myself. It's too much trouble. I'm not an actor. I'm a performer. I'm a puppeteer, and I'm not interested in being an actor. It's not interesting to me, but being a puppeteer is super interesting. And being, a clown or whatever the hell Beekman is, a clown, an idiot, performer. I don't know what the heck it is, but it's not acting because I'm not thinking about the psychology of it and all that crap. It just doesn't come into it. Everything's like two-dimensional, like who cares? It's pretending. Well, I joined the Bread and Puppet Theater which is a sort of uh, neo-German expressionist, anarchist puppet theater, very painterly artist oriented, very influenced by German expressionist art, which came out of the Weimar period and the pre-war period of World War One and the post-war period. This art movement that actually is very interesting and it's one of the greatest art movements in history, to my way of thinking. Anyway, I fell in with them when I was a college student. When I was a kid, I was 19, and I still work with the company every summer. So it's been a long time. It's well over 50 years. And I got into doing puppetry from that, working with that company, and started making my own solo shows in the late 70s and just kept going and made them kind of political and comedic. That was what I was interested in, political content and comedy. And I wanted to work in every medium in puppetry, like ventriloquism, rod puppets, marionettes, found objects, I mentioned ventriloquism, shadow puppets, you name it. I wanted to try it all. And I did. And now I'm doing theater with tchotchkes, which is a Yiddish word for knickknack or kitsch, just junk lying around the house, little figurines. And I'm using Santa figures to tell little satirical stories about our swell American civilization here. Oh, everything. I mean, the last little movie I made using the Santa Claus figures was about healthcare. It was about how expensive it is in the United States and how bogus the health insurance bullshit is, medical accidents, stuff like that. So just whatever, whatever's bugging me at any given time. And a lot of things bug me. I get bugged out all the time. All day long, I'm bugged out. Now those are very archaic expressions, so I hope it's easy to translate into Spanish. To say that I'm bugged out, that's like from the 1950s. Well, I'm interested in making comedy about it. I mean, which is a little challenging because in the United States, we are inexorably marching towards the dictatorship that the religionists and the right wing, the Nazis, want in America, which is a Christian dictatorship. So it's inevitable that's going to happen. We're going to have the President DeSantis, and he's going to take over all the schools, and everything will be in the nice Nazi way that the Christian nationalists, the Republicans, and the various fascists want. So I think it's inevitable, but I might as well make jokes about it and make fun of it, before I'm put in prison and they kill me.
Okay.
It's a very optimistic viewpoint. That's not catastrophic thinking at all, is it? But you might as well anticipate the worst, because then if things end up not that bad, then you're happy. Sort of the advantage of catastrophic thinking. Oh, the catastrophe didn't happen, so I feel better. Well, the challenge is I have ADHD, and it's very hard for me to focus. Attention deficit disorder. My mind is constantly spinning, and there's a great advantage to that. I can't think of what it is right now, but yeah, it's just, being crazy is exhausting. So that's a disadvantage. I'm working with a friend right now on a flea circus. It's a circus done with fleas. It's an archaic art form because the fleas are extinct, actually, but it's a certain kind of flea called a human flea. It's not extinct, but they're very hard to find now. which is odd because, they killed hundreds of millions of people with the plague, bubonic plague, the Black Death, all of that. But vacuums and sanitation has made them almost extinct. So there's two kinds of flea circuses, one where you use real fleas and one where you fake it with magnets and different tricks. So I'm working with a friend, an artist friend of mine, on a flea circus using the tricks, and that's been really fun and really consuming. So one of the fun parts about being an artist is when you get really excited about a project like that, and then you just do it compulsively and you have a million different ideas and you can't go to sleep at night because it's all you think about. That's the opposite of a challenge. Well, I'm fortunately or unfortunately, I'm constantly learning stuff. Um, yeah, like a new way to brush my teeth or whatever. I'm always open to find a different way of doing something, a new way of getting out of the car. Like I've been trying to figure out how to get in and out of the car without touching the car, without holding on to anything. It requires more muscles in your body and more balance. And that's interesting to me. It makes it interesting getting in and out of the car or getting in and out of bed. I figured out a funny way to get out of bed where I roll on my back, I pull my knees towards my chest, and then I just push them out really quickly, and the momentum rocks me up out of bed. Whoever's listening to this thing must think I'm really fucking crazy. And it's like I took an extra crazy pill today. But I think one of the keys for me to stay, what's the word, to stay vital or stay connected to life at the advanced age that I have is to always learning stuff, be curious enough. I mean, I'm set in my ways in many ways, I'm sure, and stubborn and just don't change. But in a lot of ways, I am opening, to learning new things and learning new ways of doing things because it's interesting. Well, my relationships that I have with my husband and my daughter, my grandchildren, my friends, my colleagues, and my dolls and my tchotchkes. But my biggest obsession, like private obsession, is probably art, particularly painting and drawing and printmaking that I like experiencing from the past 100 years, 120 years in Europe and the States and in Latin America. I think that's what interests me the most. I'm endlessly fascinated by that. Yeah. And Japanese culture and food. Japanese food, everything about Japan is great and interesting to me. I'm very interested in German culture. Yeah, and reading books, and that's what I like to do. Well, limits, yeah. I mean, there's certain things that aren't funny, or making fun of people, or punching down, they say in the States, punching down, attacking people who are in some sense don't have the power that I have. I'm a white male, so obviously I have a certain constellation of privileges in American society that aren't available to everybody. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It has nothing to do with being politically correct or woke or anything. It's just we just have choices that we can make in our lives about what we want to do and what we want to say and who we want to pick on. It's much more interesting to pick on the powerful, than the non-powerful. I don't know. Well, it's two very different worlds, operating in the puppetry world, which is very marginal and eccentric. And my shows I do with puppets are for adults. I'm not a kids entertainer. Uh, so that's just very different than the Beekman thing, where it was for children, but the interest, particularly in Latin America, where the show is very popular and really struck a chord with people. Um, yeah, it's people's reactions are very emotional, because Beekman was their friend when they were kids, and that's a big surprise. I mean, we didn't expect that. We didn't expect that kind of response from Latin America. And I think the emotional connection, the emotional response is something that is very unexpected. And I've wondered, like, why is the show so popular in Latin America? And it's just something about the Latin sensibility that really connects to the show. I mean, the show is popular in the States, as popular as an educational TV show can be in the States, which is not that popular because it's educational and people just want junk food. They don't want to eat good food. Um, but I also think it was because the guy was really close to the camera and he was looking directly at the kids and talking directly to them. And I think that establishes an emotional connection, that eye contact, the closeness to the camera. And kids don't see a big difference between the guy on the TV and somebody in the room. They don't, it's not like, oh, look at the big celebrity on TV. It's just like a friend. You know what I mean? And that creates an emotional connection. And that emotional connection, that bond, then when they get older, it's something they value because they remember the good feelings they had, um, that they got from watching the TV show. Sure. I mean, I had a dressing room. It was so far away that I never went there. It was like, it took like 4 minutes to walk there, and we only had an hour off for lunch. And if you have a 15-minute break, if it takes like 3 or 4 minutes to walk to the dressing room and 3 or 4 minutes to walk back, why even go? But it was kind of cool because Bob Breen, who was the art director on the show, he let me go into the prop department and trick out the dressing room with all this cool furniture and art and lamps and all this crap. So I had a really cool dressing room, but we mainly hung around on this set because the set was very pretty. It was a little dangerous. There were all these weird wires and sharp stuff sticking out here and there, so you had to be a little careful. But it was very aesthetically, it was very pretty and nice space to be in. It had sort of a hominess to it. It had a little living room area, a couch, and the colors were bright and very varied, but they were quite pleasing, actually. They weren't all primary colors, which is what a lot of kids' toys and stuff they design for kids, they're all in primary colors, which are extremely ugly together. Red, yellow, and blue. I mean, I just can't tolerate an environment that's all those primary colors. It's just so hideous and upsetting. And there were more subtle and beautiful colors, which I think children can appreciate. So they need more olive green and orange and brown kids, not so much red, white, red, yellow, and blue. Not really. No. I mean, I didn't even have to study the lines because all the text was on a prompter, on a teleprompter. Um, and when I did have to study my lines, I mean, we shot very quickly. We shot film style. Stop and go. It wasn't like a sitcom with three cameras, like a play where you do the play and the cameras record it and then they edit it later. This is stop and go, stop and go. And we were shooting up to, I don't know, I guess our record was it like 18 to 30 pages in a day. And traditionally on a film set, it takes a day to shoot a page. That's sort of a standard. And so we did 10, 20, 30 pages a day, but we just got good at it and we could just grind right through it. It was hard work. It was very long hours. I think sometimes we worked 10 or 12 hours. Um, but it was fun because, you really want to do the very best you can. Like, and you get a few tries, and then you either get it or you blew it, and
Okay.
you move on. Well, I when we were making the show, we didn't really think about that. It wasn't really on our minds. I mean, I think it was on the writers' minds, who did an incredible job, the writers, to take complicated things and to make them understandable for 6 to 10-year-olds. It's pretty amazing. Um, so I think they were thinking about it. I mean, we were constantly thinking about how effective is this as a teaching tool or as a way to understand things, um, because it's interesting. I mean, I don't particularly care about the idea of educating people or whatever, being part of their school or whatever it is, but it is interesting to impart fascinating information and explaining how things work because that's entertaining. It's entertaining to learn stuff if it's done in such a way that it engages you and it grabs you and everything else. So I think that aspect of it, I mean, that's been the same in my puppetry work, in making shows about real things, about political trends, about language used in the military, for example, terminology and language in the military. It's very interesting. And so I find information just can, in and of itself, be interesting. But I don't think I ever thought, well, this could really have an impact on children's lives, and they'll become scientists, and they'll become astrophysicists, and they'll become this, that, and the other. That never occurred to me. I just didn't think that far down the road. I mean, I didn't even think, oh, someday I'm gonna be 70 years old. It's like, no, I'm gonna die in a car accident. I mean, I don't know. Who thinks about this shit? I, but then I went to Latin America. I went to Brazil in maybe 2011 or something, and I did some conference, and they had a press conference at this conference, and there were a lot of journalists there, and they were very excited. And I was like, what the hell's going on? I'm like, in the States, I'm basically nobody. I'm some idiot that was on a TV show, and who gives a shit? No one gives a shit. I mean, it was popular, and then Steven Spielberg said, "Oh, this is the best kids show on television." Yeah, great. So that's that. And yeah, there's some nostalgia, and people like people in the States, they respond to it, and it's a classic TV show, and blah blah blah, but not that well known, not that famous. Then I go down there, I play at UNAM in Mexico City, and there's like 6,000 screaming people going nuts outside the show. It's like, who knew? And I came home, I told my friends, and they were like, yeah, They didn't believe me. And then I told the creator of the show, I've told everyone who ever worked on the show, I said, this is a big deal. You had a big impact on people's lives. And it's very hard for them to understand that. So it's great. I'm very happy. I'm happy that people liked it and it was meaningful in their childhood. That means a lot to me. It's great. It's exciting and fun, makes me smile, makes me laugh that people respond that way, in an emotional way, in an intellectual way. And they'll say to me, I'm an astrophysicist today because of you. I'm a science teacher. I'm a doctor because of you. And that's awesome. That's amazing. I was just doing my job, wasn't anything extraordinary, just doing what I'm supposed to do. That's it. But it's glad news to me that, oh, I did my job and I did an okay job and people were happy with it. So that's great. That's nice. Well, I think in my work, I'm primarily interested in making people laugh. That's job number one, always has been. Um, for comedians, it's like our religion, getting people to laugh. I mean, if you look at somebody like Robin Williams, like he just all the time was thinking about how to make people laugh, whether he's on stage, off stage, having a conversation in the room or whatever. And I think that's what happens when you're a comedian is that you just get tuned into constantly thinking of things that are funny. It's just a habit, constantly doing that. And that could be annoying as hell. You can annoy the crap out of your friends if you're just performing all the time, being funny and all that shit all the time. But I think that's really interesting. Yeah, to make people laugh. And then, the art making or art appreciation or whatever, just looking at the world, enjoying the colors. Um, the older I get, the more color really has a lot to do with um, my state of being. And it's interesting. I mean, I know I sound like I'm crazy, but that's probably a fair assessment. Well, Richard Pryor, um, Lord Buckley, uh, all kinds of stuff. I mean, I'll tell you, New Yorker cartoons. You know the magazine, The New Yorker? Yeah, there are cartoons in The New Yorker. And I would say about 85% of them make me laugh out loud. And they're the artists I respect most in the world, are the cartoonists in The New Yorker. I mean, I just think what they do is the most magical, amazing, inexplicable, brilliant thing. Um, I love reading the cartoons in the New Yorker. I just think it's brilliant and great. And sometimes I try to analyze like why is that funny? And I never get very far. I don't It's actually not that interesting, but once in a while I was like, well, why is that funny? I was watching Charlie Chaplin last night doing a song about a flea circus and watching his gestures and stuff. And it's not just that he's funny, but it's also he's just completely charming. He's just so you just like love the guy. And I think that's the magic to a really good performer on stage is that a performer will have something that will really make you smile because you like them. You see their humanity, you see the essence of who they are, and you like that, or you don't like that. You know, Steven Seagal. I watched a bunch of things on YouTube about him, and he's like the opposite of that. He's so unlikable. He's such an ugly, repulsive figure in so many ways. And yeah, I mean, you laugh at him, which isn't very nice, but he's a very big target. Dust, a little dust and a little greasy spot. It's hopeless thinking about that shit. I mean, I do think about it, but I remember Laurie Anderson talking about the death of her husband, Lou Reed, the musician, about the three deaths. And there's the physical death, and then there's the last time anybody says your name is one of the deaths. And that was like, oh my God, that's kind of terrifying. But it just doesn't matter. I mean, sometimes I think it matters and sometimes it doesn't. Um, I think really the most important, I mean, when you get to be my age, you actually think about these things quite a bit. Like when I turned 70, it's all of a sudden you look over your shoulder and say, oh my God, like death, it's sitting on the tip of my nose. It's a Polish expression. Death is sitting on the tip of my nose, staring at me like I'm coming to get you. So you do think about these things, but ultimately, I've come to realize it doesn't matter, and they'll forget, and they should forget because they got other things to do, and it'll all go away. And I think what you really want in life is just that you made a good impact on your family and the people around you and your friends. That you did good and you were a good person. And that, it's not easy. It's a struggle sometimes, not being selfish and not being an asshole. It's a struggle for me. So yeah, legacy. I don't know.
And
Yeah, I think about like puppetry. Oh, I was reading my entry in the Encyclopedia of Puppetry, the International Encyclopedia of Puppetry, and I thought, oh, that's nice that they're saying that I was instrumental in the invention of object theater and object puppetry and using objects in puppetry. Yeah, I like being recognized for that. But ultimately, it really doesn't matter, and it's not interesting. And the only person who cares is me. So it's stupid. I don't know. I ask myself the question every day. You know, uh, I'm still trying to figure it out. And by the time I figure it out, I'll probably like drop dead 2 seconds later. Yeah, I don't know. I'm working on it. I'm a work in progress.